Hey everybody, welcome back to Divulgence. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by author of the book DC Swamp Strikes Back, Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and their similar battles, victims separated by centuries but bound by opponents' hatreds, by Dennis A. Brennan. Dennis, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great today. Just feeling full after Thanksgiving and ready to look forward to Christmas.
That's good. That's good. Did you enjoy your Thanksgiving in Chicago? Did you spend it in the Chicago area?
Yeah, we were home and it was nice. My son and daughter-in-law, and I have a 3-month-old granddaughter. They came by, so we had a good time.
Good. Good for you. Well, thank you so much again for your time. I appreciate you reaching out and coming on. We'll obviously be talking about your book today. Can we just start off by letting us know what made you write it, and I guess maybe what you learned by writing it?
Sure. I think with Aaron Burr, most of us don't know much. We know a lot about Donald Trump. He's been
Absolutely.
for the last 10 years, he's been the story, and that'll probably go on for another few years. But Aaron Burr, in school, we learned that he had a duel with Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton died. Burr is kind of depicted as the bad guy. It doesn't help when the musical Hamilton is out there, very popular, kind of reinforcing this idea that Burr is the bad guy. And
Okay.
a friend of mine wrote a book about Aaron Burr, did a lot of research, and I read the book, and he asked me what I thought, and I said, well, great book as far as, writing, and he is a good writer. I should say he's also a Democrat consultant, does a lot of big political campaigns, congressional races, and so we might not see eye to eye on every issue, but a good guy, good writer. And I said, it's a great book, except I think you missed the real point of how Aaron Burr was treated. And right now we're having the same thing happening so many years later to Donald Trump. He doesn't see Trump as a victim. Didn't want to really discuss that. Thought I was nuts. That's a big surprise. And
Is it?
I said, okay, I think I'm going to write a book, because in my mind, I've always thought I could write a book. You hear so many people say, I'm going to write a book. I'm one of those guys in my head saying it. I don't tell people. And I thought, you know what? My friend wrote one. I think I can too. So he kind of motivated me to do it by not including the Trump stuff in there. And I started researching Burr, and I found that more and more of what not only he had written, but what other people have done on Burr made me think, boy, these guys are very much alike. I mean, there's some differences. Burr was only vice president, different time, in our history, but we had media outlets then and now that I think are very biased, and I think Burr was the victim of some of that, and, found out, or maybe I was reminded, I don't know. I don't want to say my teachers didn't tell me. I might have been absent that day when they talked about the Burr conspiracy, but this guy was tried for treason twice. And when you have that, a vice president being charged with that, or a former vice president being charged with treason, it makes you think, hey, this guy's an interesting fellow. We should do something about it. And that's where the book came about.
Interesting. Well, they do kind of seem to have pretty similar hair.
Yes, they're both your guys.
Yeah, they both look like they're wearing the old horse hair, right? So you're a Trump supporter, obviously. Were you always a Trump supporter? Can you talk a little bit about that before we get into the book?
Really, I wasn't. In 2015, I thought it was a joke or some kind of publicity stunt that he was running.
Okay.
Right? I knew him from TV. Not that I watched a lot of his show, but I knew of the show, and I had seen the show. Our former governor, Rod Blagojevich, had been on the Celebrity Apprentice. I watched that episode for sure. I remember that because Rod.
He didn't do so good, did he?
No, he didn't. And he seemed to have trouble even using a keyboard. Now,
Right.
which
Yeah.
seems like, come on, what have you been doing your whole life?
Seriously.
Yeah, he didn't do well. But I think they did develop some kind of friendship there, or at least, it sure benefited Rod when he was convicted because Trump ends up, commuting his sentence and pardoning him. So I think that show, obviously had made Trump more famous. People knew of him, as a developer in New York, and he was in all the New York papers, but he was all over the country as far as being on television and so forth. I wasn't really a supporter. I thought Jeb Bush was going to win that primary. That tells you that
Okay.
I don't know much because, Trump obviously looked at that race as one he could win. I will say I did vote for him. And, I've met a lot of people over the course of the last 10 years, and they fall into different categories. Like some have never been Trump supporters. They don't support him at all. Some I know have said, well, I like his policies, but I just don't like him. And which is,
Right.
an interesting take because I always thought he was funny. I'm not sure that our president should be so funny, but I find him to be entertaining.
I know.
And right, some people, that's exactly why they dislike him.
Yeah.
So, and then and you have some people that didn't vote for him the first time, but then voted for him maybe in 2024, or voted for him in 2016, did in 2020, did in 2024. It's a weird mix of supporters, and I don't know if other presidents have ever had that. That'd be an interesting look because, well, most haven't run 3 times either. So
true. Yeah.
But he has this group of people, that obviously have been committed since day one. I wouldn't say I was that group, but overall, yeah. If you had, I'd say I'm more Trump supporter than not. And I think, the book, although I didn't go in looking to write it that way, I think in examining Burr and Trump and their different issues, it does come across that way. Yes, it's more that Trump is a victim and so was Burr.
So, is it fair to say that your book kind of approaches both Burr and Donald Trump as misunderstood figures?
Yeah, I think so. I think misunderstood. I think victims of, when they both went to Washington, it's hard to believe, because we know Trump, we think we know Trump so well, right? I mean, I've never met him, but I feel like I know him.
I think that's one of his, you could say it's one of his pluses, but maybe one of his minuses. It's just something about him that he makes you think like you know who he is, whether you like him or not. So it kind of paints its own picture depending on how you feel about him, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think in part, some of that, naivety, he went to Washington just like Burr thinking, oh, well, now I'm here. People have loved me as a developer, as a celebrity. They're going to keep loving me, but that's not
Right.
Politics. We know that. We now, unfortunately, no matter what party you're on, it's like if the other side brings it up, you're probably against it. It's certainly if you're an elected official, that's what it is. Some of us that vote would say, well, no, I'm not always like that, but we tend to side with our party. And you see it at times where, all is forgiven if it's your guy. It's like, well, that's okay. There's a reason for it. There's an excuse. And it doesn't matter. It seems to run through both parties that way, where we don't hold them accountable in our own party. I think Trump, when he got there, thought, oh, I've got these great ideas. Everybody's going to go along with it. Well, the Democrats weren't looking to go along with it, and some of the Republicans weren't. And, Burr found the same thing. Burr's story, he ran for vice president with Jefferson twice. The first time Jefferson lost to Adams, but because the way the system was set up, then Jefferson as the second highest vote getter out of the four candidates, became vice president. Most people, I think, remember that in history. They had a rematch 4 years later. Jefferson took Burr as his vice president again. He didn't blame him for the loss, although some of Jefferson's people did. What I would call the Virginia Mafia, the Madison Monroe group, they wanted to have this presidency going on out of Virginia for a long time. Burr, when they lost the first race to Adams, he went back to New York and he elected legislators in New York that would be his legislators that would vote for Jefferson and him, because at that time the electoral votes were decided by the state legislators. So it didn't matter how the people voted in that state. Those legislators could throw their electoral votes to whatever candidate. They switched from Adams to Jefferson based on Burr, and Burr doesn't really get the credit in history of being the guy that did that. It made the difference, and Jefferson became president. I mean, that's a pretty good race, though, Adams and Jefferson. Like, now we talk about, why can't we find any good candidates?
Yeah, for sure. That's huge right now. That's huge, especially for the Democrats. But I think it's pretty big on both sides.
You hear it all the time, though, and it's been going on for so long. It's the people that don't vote. Oh, there's nobody that's any good. I wonder how many people said that when Adams and Jefferson were running. Like, these two clowns.
Right.
Can't get anybody good.
There's always one, though. So
right. There's always an excuse to not vote, though.
Yeah.
If you don't want to, you'll come up with a reason. So, I mean, Burr had, I think he thought when he went to Washington as Jefferson's second, especially after the work he did for the election, that he would be, welcomed with open arms. And for the most part, Jefferson did, but his people who were constantly in his ear, were very wary of Burr. They saw him as the guy that might, succeed Jefferson and take over, not them. And, that was a problem. They tried to undercut him at every point with Jefferson, and were largely successful because, Burr was not the candidate, the second Jefferson presidency. And that's where a lot of his trouble really started, the duel and so forth. He ended up, some of it's self-inflicted. I'd say that's, we could make that argument with Trump too, and with all of us, right? And certainly anybody that's held office, there's been some self-inflicted pain there, right? You're not going to be able to, you can't walk through government service and say, none of it was my fault. You make decisions, you might make one bad decision, out of 100, but that one bad decision could be really bad or very unpopular. So,
and that could be the one that they look at through history.
Right. Is that what you want to be known at? I think Burr is known for the duel, which is probably better.
Can you talk about the duel a little bit? Because honestly, I as a Canadian, I didn't grow up on like the classic U.S. history. So I'm not all that familiar with that.
Okay. Yeah, well, most of us that went to U.S. schools probably aren't that familiar either. But
okay, fair enough. We're all going to learn something today, my friend.
Yeah, we learned the basics. Like they tell us, hey, there was a duel, because there is so much in history for the teachers to cover that they try to get through as much as they can. Yeah. And what it came down to is Burr and Hamilton were always enemies. Really, they both are from New York. Hamilton was aligned. There were like four families, not mafia families, but families in politics, which maybe some would say, hey, not much difference there. They kind of controlled New York politics at the time. Burr wasn't part of any of that, but Hamilton was. His father-in-law was one of the big leaders there. So they had a dislike for each other, and nobody knew where Burr was politically. He was kind of like Trump, Trump could have been a Democrat, and we would have said, yeah, I see that. Because prior to him running for president, I think he was a Democrat at times, and certainly spouted issues out there that were not very Republican. So with the duel, Burr, a letter appeared in a newspaper, or a pamphlet at that time, which is what the newspapers were, and it was very critical of Hamilton. And Hamilton thought it was Burr, said, it was done under a pseudonym. He said, hey, he wanted Burr to apologize publicly, and Burr didn't, and said he wouldn't. And because of that, Hamilton said that he wanted to have a duel with him. He challenged him to a duel, which duels were illegal, but they were still done at times. And, Hamilton challenged him to a duel. They actually crossed over into New Jersey to do it because they felt if something happened, they were less likely to be charged criminally. So these guys are, to me, how bad are you if you're taking the time to leave the state? I'm thinking you're not that mad. Put the guns down.
Yeah, seriously.
Some of it at the duel, it gets a little, in the history books, they really don't get into it, but a lot of the Hamilton history that's been written and the musical make it apparent, or their side of the story is Hamilton, although he challenged him to a duel, shot the gun into a tree or into the air. He wasn't trying to shoot Burr.
Okay.
And at that time, with dueling, the idea was if someone wasted the shot, you could just say, okay, it's over. Burr, the historians that read about Burr don't say that. They say Hamilton just missed on his shot. And roughly at the same time, Burr shot and was a better shot. Burr had a military background. He was well liked by Washington in the the Revolutionary War. He shot Hamilton. Hamilton, succumbed to his injuries a day later and died. You know what?
That's how he died? Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't
know. What
makes
it tragic is only a short time, and I want to say it was like 6 months earlier, Hamilton's son had been in a duel and had also died in a duel. And you would think,
what?
You would think that a guy who lost his son that way would say, I'm not dueling. I know I would.
Seriously. That's that's a weird paradox to like the Kennedy family. Holy cow. That's wild.
Yeah, it is. It makes you wonder, like with history, when you hear things and read things like that. It struck me as, so strange, just on a personal level that you would go dueling. It is very strange. I can't imagine that anybody would do that. They'd be like, well, I think what I would say is, well, people have said negative things about me, written negative things about me. I'm just going to have to either write something myself or forget about it. I can't control what everybody thinks. But Hamilton decided to duel.
Wow, that's crazy. I wonder if Trump would duel. You think Trump would duel if duels were still a thing? I mean, I feel like he probably would, right?
He probably would. And, I've had this conversation with people, and I wonder, like, if dueling, pay-per-view has become so big here with fights.
Oh, there you go, man. There it is. That's what it would be. That is what it would be. It would be like a big event. They'd sell a pay-per-view for sure.
Right. Trump would probably want to own the pay-per-view. Figure out a way to, how can I make money out of school?
He'd have to run the pay-per-view. It'd have to be at Trump Casino or Trump Stadium or one of the Trump, it would have to be at a Trump location. Oh yeah, he would he would find all the money he can from that situation.
At the same time, he'd probably be confident that he'd win the duel. I don't so like I'm gonna be in it and I'm gonna
I mean, I watched a documentary about him, and it talked about his need to win, and it talks about like his golf courses and how he is named the winner in all these golf tournaments that didn't really happen or they don't exist. He just likes to be the winner, right? So I feel like he would he would rig it or something. He would make sure that he came out on top.
Declare himself the winner.
Yeah. Even if he's shot in the hospital, if they are interviewing him on his deathbed or something, it's rigged. My gun didn't go off. My gun was jammed or whatever. Who knows?
Well, I'll tell you though. I mean, he did. He got away with the shot to the ear. So
Oof, yeah,
I guess you would think when you've been that close, maybe you wouldn't want to duel either. I mean, it's so silly to kind of think that people at that time, in Hamilton's time and Burr's time, this is how you would settle the problem. I've heard of politicians, throwing, hands with each other or, suing each other is much more popular.
Yeah.
But
now especially.
But to aim a gun at someone and think that's going to solve it, doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's where we were at that time. And that duel, a lot of people think that was what ruined Burr's career, and that's kind of how it's taught in school. But that's really not the case. Jefferson was dropping him as vice president, or I should say what Jefferson told him. The first time Jefferson didn't really have a say, and they put Burr on the ticket.
Okay.
The party did because they thought Burr would help them. The second time when they won, Jefferson did have a say, and he fought for Burr because he knew Burr was working in New York for him. The third time, Jefferson told Burr that he wasn't going to get involved, that he wasn't going to take an active role, which basically signaled to the party, pick someone for me. I'm not pushing Burr on you. And because Jefferson was going to win. It wasn't a matter of, him going to lose. He wasn't going to lose that race. And he really didn't need Burr at that point. But so he was dumping him either way. It didn't matter with the duel. And Burr didn't fight for the vice presidency. I think, everything I've seen is he just figured, okay, I'll go do something else. Unfortunately, what occurs is what leads to the real end of his political career, which was known both as the Spanish conspiracy and then also the Burr conspiracy, where he was charged. Yeah, he was charged with treason twice for this. The first time the case was dismissed because it was in the wrong jurisdiction. And the book goes into great detail about, the DC swamp. Jefferson and his people, Monroe and Madison, one of the relatives was the U.S. attorney prosecuting the case, and they were kind of directing it from the White House. And so Burr, was a lawyer himself, put a lot of faith in the legal system. Not, Donald Trump doesn't put faith in the legal system at all. So there are some things where they're not the same. And, you saw that in Trump's cases. He put faith in himself. He'd leave the courtroom, talk to the press, and he put some faith in the American people to believe him over the prosecutors, which is unusual. Most people don't believe the guy charged with crimes, but that's how he handled it. Burr was pretty much silent. He just let it run, used the legal system. He did have other lawyers working with him, and they just pled the case on the facts that this doesn't meet the definition of treason. The first time, it was in Missouri, and he said, that's the wrong jurisdiction for treason. It's gotta be back, in Washington. You gotta go back. The judge agreed, dismissed the case. But the whole conspiracy came down to the charge was that Burr was going to form his own army, travel down the Mississippi River to meet up with a guy named Wilkinson, who was a general in our defending the U.S. He was in Louisiana. It's Louisiana now. And that's where he was stationed at. They were going to then take the men that they formed, the army, and go west into, what's known now as California, New Mexico, Arizona. Mexico, it was Spanish territory controlled by the King of Spain at the time, who was an ally of the U.S. And the argument was, and Burr denied that this was a plan, by the way, but this was the charge that that's what he was going to do. And they were going to start a war with Spain over this land and take this land. There are, Wilkinson testified against Burr, which isn't unusual. Trump saw his own attorney testify against him, right? So often it is people near you that testify. Wilkinson had a shady background, though. He was being paid by Spain at the same time he was working in the U.S. Military. So, which seems like you shouldn't be able to do that. That should be a crime. I'm sure it is now, but I'm not sure it was then. So Burr was tried for treason, dismissed. He thought it was over, but the Jefferson people said, no, it's not. They rearrested him. They chased him down, basically. He had left Missouri. They chased him down with military, took him across the country, which at that time, you couldn't throw him on the jet and fly him. So he's going by horseback across the country over the course of, a lot of time.
Yeah, I bet that trip sucked.
Right. They drag him before, this is a guy like Trump. His dad, Burr's dad, started Princeton University. This isn't
Really?
this isn't a kid from the street, where you go, or some,
yeah,
tough guy.
He was a nepo baby, a bit of a nepo baby.
A bit of it, yeah. Yeah, he wasn't a tough guy. You're not seeing this guy pulling his gun, shooting while riding a horse. He's not a cowboy. So he's brought back to stand trial for treason again. Justice Marshall, who was the Chief Justice at the time, oversees the trial. Interesting little tidbit, though. Marshall's the cousin of Jefferson, but they're not allies. Marshall was appointed by Adams. So Marshall hears all the testimony and so forth and points out that in treason you need two witnesses, and they had one. Wilkinson placed Burr in the conversations, placed him at the time everything was discussed, and he talked about another meeting. And they said, okay, well, you got to have another witness that can say he was at this other meeting. Burr was never at the other meeting, so the conspiracy kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
They couldn't produce another witness, and Marshall, acquitted him. Found him not guilty based on you don't have you have to have two witnesses, and without that, you're free to go. Now, in my book, I talked about other people that have written books, and some, like my friend, is convinced that Burr was not guilty. I'm convinced that legally he was not guilty because they didn't have enough evidence. Now, did he do it? Don't know for sure. I mean, there's not a lot of documentation that would prove he did it. There's some. I mean, there was correspondence between Wilkinson and Burr, but it was in a code. And when the code was deciphered, the person that deciphered it was Wilkinson. So it's like me writing a note to you in a language you and I allegedly are the only ones that know. We do a code that I say, this is what it says. Well, nobody else knows what it says. So what if I'm lying? And I think a lot of the, supporters of Burr maintain Wilkinson was lying. That's not what it said. And, Burr, always denied it. So, and even to his death, Burr, because tragically that was the end of his career. He went to Europe for a while. He remarried. He had some business losses, but he always denied he had anything to do with it. And he said he would rather die than to turn against the country. Right. The only thing that came close was when, there was the Mexican-American War 40 years later, I think it is, and Burr said, the U.S. was actually fighting Mexico over all that land and eventually won, so when they talk about, oh, there's stolen land. No, we actually won that war. The troops were in Mexico City, ready to take over Mexico. We let them keep Mexico. We ended up with California, Arizona, New Mexico, the states basically in that area. And we paid Mexico a sum of money. I think it was 15 million at the time, which is roughly 450 million now. So
Okay.
it's so there was a war. The U.S. did take that property. Burr at the beginning, Wilkinson at the beginning of this whole argument had said the plan wasn't to go to war solely on their own, that they thought once the battle started, the U.S. government would come in and help them. I don't know why they thought that, but Burr denied that. As I said, when this Americans were fighting with Mexico, it became clear the Americans were going to win, and it was kind of settled, or the U.S. would conquer all the land. So Burr mentioned at that time, I was just 40 years too early. That's the closest quote you can find to him kind of admitting that was a plan. But
Really?
But that was, at the end.
So sorry, just to back up real quick. What exactly was the details of the crime, of the treason that he was being charged for again?
That he was taking a army and fighting a allied country. Spain was an ally, and by doing that, he was committing treason.
Okay.
And I think,
why would he want to do that though? Like, did they get into that, or?
Yeah, Wilkinson gave two different stories, and this was the other problem with his testimony.
Of course.
One story he said Burr and him were taking over, and Burr was going to make himself king or president of this new country. Then he changed the story to say, no, we were going to fight, and then we would ask the U.S. to jump in and help after they saw us winning. And I don't know that either story makes much sense. Burr was an American vice president. That would be a heck of an ego if he thought he could form his own country. And, the other part, why are you out starting wars on behalf of the U.S.? So I don't know which one makes him look worse, but neither one really was proven. Just was used as a treason trial.
What are your thoughts on whether he was guilty or not?
I don't think he was guilty, but I say there's not enough proof either way. So I look at it like there's some suspicion there. Like if they had done more work, maybe they could have gotten more witnesses or done, but that's a lot easier now than it was then, I'm sure. Now they just drag you into the grand jury and start questioning you. Back then, you got to find the person, you got to track them down, bring them back to, I guess it was Washington at that time, put them before a grand jury. That's not going to be easy. I think they were in a rush to convict Burr and felt if we just get him before this, court, we're going to be able to convict him. And I think there's some similarity in those cases with Trump. They kind of fall apart because there's not enough there. He might have done something, but you can't just kind of tie it together with string. You have to actually have enough facts and enough witnesses. And I think sometimes the prosecutors think, well, this guy's disliked. He's going to be an easy.
Exactly. But he's got just as big a following as he does a hatred. I don't know. I mean, I don't know which one would be stronger. I don't know which one would be stronger, but
no. And it depends what area you're in. Like in New York, yes, it was going to be easier to convict him. If you're in certain areas, and that's why some of those cases, you charge him in Washington, D.C. Yeah, it's very anti-Trump. So, but if you put him in, a state that might be a middle, like in Arizona, you probably can't convict him. You certainly can't convict him in Alabama or in, Mississippi or so forth. So, or Florida, that's a good one. I think that's a problem though, when prosecutors jump to a conclusion before they've actually gotten the evidence.
We got a comment here from the audience. Y'all are missing the elephant in the room. You're completely daft as to why Burr would do what he did. It was about central banking. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Hamilton's the guy known for, the banking system. No doubt about it. I don't know. Did he say we were daft? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, people online can be, they don't have the best class sometimes. So I wouldn't don't take it to heart.
I'm not going to challenge him to a duel, but I mean, yeah, I think there was a division. Hamilton was big on the whole banking system, and I think if to give him credit, the banking system was his baby, right? But I think he should be credited with that because that's something that worked out well. But Burr and I think many others at that time, you had a division on not only central banking, but the power of the federal government versus the power of the states. And that battle went on for a long time. And we had a civil war over such a division, due to states. We still have somewhat of that battle going on. What powers do the states have? What power does the federal government have? I don't think that's what caused, Burr to be charged with the conspiracy. And I don't think I didn't find anything that said, Burr was trying to form his own country because of that. It's just another argument out there that people may have disagreed on.
I think we kind of got into it a little bit, but what were some of the battles that Burr had with what you call the swamp, the DC swamp, and how do you see that similar to some of the problems Trump's gone through?
Yeah, I think one of the battles, I think the first one we touched on a little bit, the whole idea of being this outsider and coming to Washington. There are people that are established there already. Jefferson was an established, person, obviously. You had Monroe and Madison. All these people had high-level government positions. Hamilton, Monroe, Madison, Jefferson. And even in different administrations, right? It didn't matter so much as politics as it does now. But, when Burr went there, I think he didn't realize that. He didn't realize what he was up against. And I think he saw it especially during the treason trial where you had, relatives. Like Hamilton had a lot of friends throughout the country. He was a big leader in his party. Even though he didn't hold office, he was kind of the man behind the scenes. And so he was responsible for getting a lot of people elected. He was responsible for having a lot of people appointed to positions. And he had a good connection to the newspapers. Back then we had the party press era, which I talk about in the book. It's a lot like what we have now in our media, where it's very one-sided depending on where you sit. And the papers at that point were owned, if they weren't owned by outright by the political parties, they were owned in the sense that they received so much money from the parties through advertising that this is how they were able to keep the control over what was being written and printed about them. Hamilton himself started the New York Post. So Burr was battling, like in the Missouri case when he was up for treason. The prosecutor was related back to Madison. You had, he also owned a newspaper. So the newspaper was publishing everything about the trial against Burr, and that was the dominant paper in that area. I think, for Burr trying to battle that, and I should say, some people talk about, the deep state versus the swamp, because they seem to be used sometimes interchangeably. I look at the swamp is not only the people, the deep state to me are the people working in the government long term, all the different departments, CIA, FBI, defense. The swamp includes the lobbyists, the longtime politicians, the media, the bigger group. And that's the tougher one to overcome. They often say, let's go after the deep state, but everybody's working together. And we still see it where, information's leaked to a certain news source and it comes out, or not even leaked. It's someone who won't go on record, but it's good enough for the media because they can now say an anonymous source, and they're covered as far as being sued. They could have made up the source. Honestly, how do you know? And, that becomes a problem. So I think Burr found that the same way Trump has, that you're fighting this conglomerate of different, they all have the same interests, whatever side they're on, but they're all working together in unison. And it becomes very difficult to overcome that when the target's on you.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say that Trump is an easier target now than Burr was then?
Well, yeah, in some ways, yes, because Trump, we've got the immediate 24/7 media now, right?
Yeah.
For CNN seems old school now, right? With the news 24 hours, and it was such a big deal back then. But you've got several networks that do that, and all the networks would break in on a story, even if they're not, fully 24/7 news. But you also have social media. Elon Musk makes the point, we are the news with X now. And in some ways, I don't know if it's the news, but it's something, right? Because anybody can.
Yeah, it's a way to spread news, or advertise news, or publish news, but it's not. It's not.
And I don't think it's only X. You've got Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. All these. The problem is, which is kind of obvious, if I'm putting out the news or you're putting out the news, it may be correct. Just the other day, we had the National Guardsmen murdered. Yeah. One of them was murdered, and the other one was shot. And awful. Originally the story came out within a couple hours. The West Virginia governor is saying they're both dead. I suspect. Really? Yeah, I suspect he got that off of social media because I had seen it on social media, but nobody in the federal government, the administration didn't say it. The families didn't say it. But he went out and said he actually issued an actual release from West Virginia because these two soldiers are from West Virginia saying they both died, and for a while I thought that was true. I'm like, why would the West Virginia? He has to know.
Yeah, right.
You don't know who knows and who doesn't know. You now end up having to check the news, no matter what it is.
Like a recheck.
Yes.
Not only a recheck, but like a counter check, like checking like a different source. Mm-hmm. But you still have to sometimes recheck. So, yeah, absolutely.
It's very difficult to be a consumer of news now, because even in a regular news source, forget about I post it and people go, I don't know, is that right? Or the governor of West Virginia posts it. I thought, well, he wouldn't, put something that's a lie. He must know somehow. But now even when you see, the Associated Press or, pick a newspaper, anybody, often there's so much opinion in there. You're like, did this really happen? Or worse yet, somebody took their masthead and made up a headline and threw it on social media. And with that, people read it. They don't really read the story. They just see the headline and they think something happened that didn't happen. So there's a lot of misleading out there. I think, the good thing on Trump's side is you can respond pretty quickly now. Back then, Aaron Burr couldn't really respond in a quick fashion.
Right. Absolutely.
He didn't try really either, but I mean, it'd be interesting if Trump was in that time, how he would have done it. But, we're all children of our time. So Trump has grown up in this, or he's become a politician in this age of, social media. And, he seems to have a handle on that, being able to respond quickly. But he also gets beat up out there. So it works both ways.
I think there is, I think it's called, have you heard of ground news?
I have. Recently I heard about it though, yes.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that, it's Canadian too, I see. Interesting, right on.
Does that make it better if it's Canadian?
Well, you never know. But yeah, so I think that's a way of essentially it's an app where you download it, and if you're looking at a story or something, it gives you different sources, and I think it also provides other different analytics and observations about stories and stuff. So I'm hoping that maybe I'm going to look into that, and I'm hoping that maybe something like that will help with all the the amalgamation and combination of all this 360 news and 24/7 news and the social media and the alternate media, and it comes at you. There's just so much these days that personally I have to take time to just put the phone down and enjoy a classic movie or enjoy the weather or something, because it's just overload. There's just so much going on. I mean, there's always so much going on, but now there's so many people with podcasting and stuff. There's so many people covering it, and everyone's anyone can be a journalist, which is great. But it just I don't think our brains have evolved enough to keep track of it and properly assess it all. I think a lot of people take stuff for fact because they're scrolling through it so fast. They're not fact checking. They're not even giving it a second thought, really. That could be dangerous. So hopefully something like ground news can help with that.
Yeah, I think it will. It's kind of like it's a double check on what we're hearing or seeing, but it's unfortunate that that's what journalism has become, because it's not only the individuals. I understand you have individual people out there, and I always wonder, Facebook is big on this for some reason. If you open up Facebook and you're in there are people that will post absolutely false, 100% false items on there and make it seem like it's a fact, like there's a story. And you're like, where is this coming from? There's no link. At least if you post it, as Trump would say, fake news, you post a fake news story, at least there's a link to it. You go, oh, New York Times says this. Well, you may think it's fake. They don't think it's fake, but whatever. But you've at least got a story. You've got a source to it. Some of these people, they just post it, and it's like, well, now I've got to look this up, and nobody else is covering it. And it's like, it takes you a while before you realize this is a fake story. Someone just put that on there for no reason. And people will respond to it. The funnier part is they think it's true, and rather than doing the due diligence, and I see why they don't, because while we can all be reporters, we don't all want to be reporters.
Right. Yeah.
We want to rely on the news. At some point, you want to have some reliance. And I know the answer, if you talk to journalists, is, well, just listen to me. Go to a news source you really trust. Well, we already kind of do that, right? But then you'll have people arguing. If you're conservative, you're like, quit watching MSNBC. And if you're liberal, you're like, quit watching Fox. Where do you get your information from?
Yeah. And now it's it's not only that, it's why are you listening to Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
Why are you listening to Candace Owens or Piers Morgan or Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes, or and there's so many of these other people popping up like Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes that just have these pretty wild, either wild ideologies or just wild ways of presenting them, and
Yes.
some people don't properly understand them. Like I think Nick Fuentes is kind of a combination of that, and not that I necessarily pay all that much attention to him, but I think kind of the point of what we're getting into is that sometimes it's just unavoidable. You know who these people are because they just keep popping up, and you eventually you see them once, okay, you see them twice, you know their name, you see them again, you know one of their views, you see them again, you know two of their views, you see a couple comments on them, you hear some things about it, all of a sudden you have a good idea of what they are, what they do, how they do it. So yeah, it's I've had a lot of conversations on this show about alternative media exploding, and yeah, it's huge, and it's having a huge impact in politics.
It is, and some of it's good. Some of it's good.
Oh, absolutely. Like I try to do good here,
Right. The beauty is when they're doing it well, you're like, okay. But I think too often, and you mentioned a few names in there without me repeating them, there are people who will go for controversy rather than facts because they know the farther you go to one side or the other of the spectrum politically,
that's where the money is, man.
That's where the money is, right? So you can be, people might say, well, that guy's a racist and a fascist, and he doesn't care. He's making millions of dollars.
He's getting paid by all these people who either maybe are racists or whatever, or just people who maybe they get the content or they enjoy it and they don't care either way. But there's a market there. There's markets there. There are.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, that's the problem here. I don't know if you have the same problem there, but here, we often lament the idea like there's no straight news source, like down the middle. CNN used to be that, I think, when they started. They're not anymore, but they used to be. Maybe someday they'll get back to it because it looks like there's going to be a sale there. And, the thing is, we say we want it, but then when people, when you put it out there, will people watch it? Or will they go back to their, corners and watch what they're already watching, or the one that tells them what they want to hear rather than the straight news? And I think, and I'm not saying just straight news, there should be some debate. Like if you want to have someone on here's the liberal viewpoint, or this is my viewpoint, this is your view. Okay, great. Let's discuss it and not scream at each other and come up with conspiracy theories that, the far right or far left, whatever side, is buying into. And there's enough of those people to make those, the individuals a lot of money and a lot of fame. But it's not doing any good for the country or the world. It's really turning us against each other. And unfortunately, though, that still is the way for people to make a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's going to keep going for a while now anyways. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But back to your book. So I know that I believe paranoia is a theme in the book. Can you talk about that a little bit when it comes to Burr and Trump?
Yeah, I think both men have been accused of being a little paranoid. Trump, we've heard it many times with people saying, they're not out to get him. But, one of the themes, I think a whole chapter is devoted about, are you paranoid if everybody is out to get you?
Or if at least half of the half of the line is on the other people on side of the line, or you have to get you, right? I mean, come on.
Well, even now you have people talking, most recently in the last week or so, and it's one of those things, I don't know if it's true yet, but because I think it's one of those rumors that starts saying that the Bush family is going to try to reassert itself in Republican politics and take it back from the MAGA movement when Trump's term is up. I mean, the problem with that is the Bushes don't have any political position anymore. Right.
Who do they have? I mean, Jeb has got to be bagged out, and like, could he really come back? And I mean, what's he doing right now? Do you know what he's up to right now?
I don't know what he's doing right now, but yeah, I don't see him as having a political following at this point. It's one of those rumors that I'm sure the establishment Republicans think they can take the party back from Trumpism. But, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio and people like that are going to be a force. I don't see them. I mean, I suppose if you lost some elections, you could take it back when you're at the bottom of the hill. You're not going to take it back when the president is done with his term. And that's, I think, the fight is going to be J.D. Vance against whoever the Democrats have. It is interesting, though, that those kind of things permeate out there, and it's kind of crosses, between the politics and the media, and it could make a person paranoid. I think if you're the Trump people, you're like, geez, they won't even give up now when I control the party. But, for Trump, he had, all these people in his own party not really looking to cooperate with him in his first term. He brought in some people. I think, this time in this term, I think what he's looked at is he wanted loyalists. No other, I think a good example is he's got Pam Bondi as Attorney General. And we're going to, have to see how she does as Attorney General. I think right now reviews are mixed.
Yeah.
Right? And,
yeah, man.
Whereas he had Jeff Sessions, who had the issue, and really, as a lawyer, if you have a conflict, you ought to tell your client. He didn't. And then Bill Barr, who's a well-respected attorney, but probably wasn't the right guy for Trump. And maybe he was more establishment Republican than Trump Republican. It's weird that there is such a thing, but I think there is.
Yeah.
And, so he felt like he couldn't get things done. And that's just one example. There were other people that are John Bolton, who,
Right.
want to start wars when Trump really doesn't want to. And, when you have these people in your own party against you, and then, on the other side, he had people who I think he thought just friendly, that he was a supporter of Clinton, that Trump was. He had given money to Schumer. He gave a lot of people money and supported them in their elections. And somehow he thought they'd be with him. But they weren't not only not with him, they were looking to put him in prison. And I think that was, an awakening for him. And I think the same thing with Burr, where you find out, you go to Washington and you think, oh, well, I'm the vice president. Everybody's with me. I mean, they're going to support the president. Even then, that wasn't the case. People in your own party are looking on how can we replace him as vice president? How can we get him out? Not to mention you have the other party that truthfully wants you out because they want Jefferson out.
Yeah.
So it becomes, I could see where even in any politics at the local level, and then you have the media, divided, and, if they're writing stories about you, you always find out with journalism, you read a story and you're like, well, that could be true because you're not involved. But I'll tell you, if they write a story about you, you know whether it's true or not. And, I had the pleasure of serving 12 years on a local school board. I was a village trustee. So I've been involved in political campaigns also, mostly local. And some of the things that were written were unbelievable. There was a mid-sized newspaper in the suburbs, daily columnist would, he had second page. He wrote, his column, but he wrote it like it was a news story. And I had several arguments with him, but one of the arguments I had with him, I called him up and maybe not the smartest thing to do when you're elected, to be calling journalists. This is something Trump does too. Maybe that's why I liked him. He would call them up or yell at them.
Yeah.
And I said, I called him on something that he wrote about a campaign. And I'm like, your paper wrote the exact opposite 2 years ago. And he's like, really? I'm like, yes. I said, look it up. And he tells me, I wish I could, but we don't have a system like that here. It's hard to look stuff up.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, my God, so, and they were, to me, it became clear then that, and I thought it was only at the local level until Trump really, where these news people take sides. Like they're on your side or they're against you. And it's disheartening when they're against you because you're sitting there going, what did I do wrong? I'm in this nothing position. It's a village trustee, or it's you're sitting here at a school board. What's the big deal? I went to the point of actually starting my own newspaper because of it. So,
really?
Oh yeah. It was like, if you're not going to write the story, I'll make sure it's written. So I was one of the first.
For you, man. Holy shit.
Well, and it becomes, you get your story out, but again, I don't know that you're doing any favors for the credibility of journalism. You're kind of played into the whole problem. It's like, you're bad. Well, I'll be bad too. I'll do it my way, and we'll write it from my viewpoint. And,
right.
So are you any better? I'd say not, but I thought we were.
I feel like the people are better off because at least it's out there.
They're getting both sides.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And often, the funny thing is there'd be people saying, I didn't know that. Well, now you know. I mean, because, they wouldn't print it. And, often you would read a story in politics and say, you're missing something here. Like, how about this side of the story? If you put both sides there and people go, oh, okay, I see why this guy did that or this, I'm okay with that. But if you purposely keep out one side so you can slant it your way, it's like Bill O'Reilly used to have his show on Fox, and it was the no spin zone. He would call the part, which I don't know if it was a no spin zone, but I get the concept. It's like,
sounds great.
Yeah. And you come on as a guest. I don't want you giving me the spin of the party. I want, give me the answer that's really there. Let's discuss it. That part I like, because often you'll see these people on, news shows, news programs on Sundays. Here we have a lot of them, but even during the week, and they're just saying the same thing the party has already said. And it becomes, okay, I don't need that analysis.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Right.
I mean, I know what the party thinks. I want to know what, someone independently thinks.
But people who don't pay as much attention as someone like yourself, it serves more of a purpose, right? Because it's just making people think what the party wants them to think, and understand things from the perspective the party has. And so, yeah. And if you repeat it enough, it becomes the truth. Exactly. That part of it too. Absolutely. Yeah.
It is amazing because you'll see the parties send out several people, and we have so many news sources, and they're all saying the same thing, or something happens. This is, I think, where Trump could be considered, people might think he's paranoid, but when everybody has the same response to like the ICE, raids or whatever we want to call them in their cities, and they're all saying the same, like every governor, every mayor in opposition is saying the same thing immediately. It's like, wait a minute, what, you all believe this together, or you're all spouting the same thing from the party? And it's like, I'm not really believing your story. So,
yeah. Like, what do you really think,
Right. It's, if we attack them enough saying the same thing, it becomes, well, the ICE officers are fascist. They're on about the covering on their face,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the covering. The
And
covering is, yeah. I mean, I can see how it's very intimidating and it's borderline scary, but at the same time, it's like, well, if that's your job, you go to work like that, do you really want people knowing, like people that are likely to do something to you because of your job? Do you want people knowing who you are, or what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, all that? I mean,
yeah,
that's the extent of it that I understand it. I know I
no,
haven't heard a huge debate about it. I just hear those talking points bouncing around. So,
yeah, I think that does kind of get it. They, what they call doxing now. If they can identify you, they will go after you. And it's like, I I find that it's kind of foreign that that's what you would do in a debate, but people do it, and organizations, whoever's doing it. And unfortunately, you know, people can get hurt doing that. It's families. Like, even if you dislike ICE, and some people honestly do dislike them, okay, dislike them all you want. There's people that dislike the police too. I mean, we don't track them down at their home and harass their families, or whatever they're doing in
yeah,
life,
right.
or we shouldn't. So
Exactly. Let's see, what else should we get into? So for the last election, the Democrats, they used the tagline "Saving Democracy," which is, I mean, obviously, it's a bold statement if you're thinking into it as it is. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I was aggravated by the whole saving democracy idea. I mean, I've supported and opposed different people for office, whether it's president or else something else. And I've thought, well, things aren't going to be as good for the next 4 years or whatever. But I've never thought, geez, the country's through because someone's elected as president or, governor or something like that. This idea that they've espoused that somehow Trump is able to end democracy by himself is kind of on the lunatic fringe. It would sell on those kind of conspiracy theory, podcasts if they were to go and do that, because the idea, we have too many things built in besides the court system, the Congress, all the states, the military. You can't really end democracy without the military. And I just don't see a bunch of military guys who swore an oath saying, yeah, I'm with whatever president. We're going to now make him president for life. We're just not one of those countries. It's not going to happen. And to use that as your issue, I don't think it does you much good. First of all, I think it's a bad issue politically, if that's the best you can do. And it's untruthful. I don't think you're ending democracy. If anything, you're making yourself seem foolish. And I think, I didn't see Trump as the threat to democracy. I saw what was happening, with censorship, with cutting people out of Facebook, stopping. It's funny. I thought they were back doing that recently. This whole thing where people were taking off Facebook or taking off what was Twitter before Musk. But probably a week ago, I had a notice like I couldn't get on Facebook. And I must say, I wasn't a big Facebook user. I was registered for probably the last 10 years, but didn't use it. Got
Okay.
back on with the book. And it said that my account has been suspended. Well, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with that. Why is it suspended? I'm trying to find out. I'm looking up on the internet. Like, what do you do if your account's suspended? And there's an appeal process, but it also says if you appeal and you lose, your account can never be opened again. And I thought, what did I do? And I'm thinking, did I post something? But it turned out that I had someone, it was actually me that was on, I posted something from a different location than normal. It must have been on the Wi-Fi, because
Okay.
otherwise how they knew, and they weren't sure it was me. And
Okay.
I'm like, what? So they put it back on. But I thought, why am I going through this to keep my account going? And this is like something at 11 o'clock at night I'm fixing. And I'm thinking, this is silly. But that said, I haven't seen any evidence that that's happening anymore. But at one time, you had the president taken off of Facebook, his account at Twitter. Now he's made money off of that by having lawsuits. So
yeah, and then he started Truth Social.
Right. So yeah, he did do that, and between the settlements, Truth Social, he won re-election. So maybe people thought that was terrible. I don't know how much that played into it. I thought, yeah, you can't. The idea of saving democracy by turning off every voice that you don't like seems a little contradictory, and it's un-American for sure. I mean, we always let people, publish what they want, speak what they want within the libel laws, and you just deal with it otherwise, court-wise, and there's great protection for everybody that publishes anything or broadcasts. So I didn't get the whole saving democracy, but I'm not sure. I think the economy was so bad under Biden, immigration was a problem, illegal immigration, that I think they couldn't come up with another issue that they thought would fly. And, I just think it would have been better not to say saving democracy. Maybe just, we don't like Trump, because that probably would have worked just as well. I don't know.
What are your thoughts on January 6th?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's shocking to people when you see, people climbing on the Capitol and all that. I never thought it was as bad as the media made it or the Democrats made it. I think so. I was surprised. Actually, I was surprised by two things. The first thing was, what, we can't enter the Capitol? Because I think I did a tour there, but well, we can't just walk in. I might have been one of the idiots, going, oh, it's open, I can go in. And at the state level, our state capitol, you go through security, but you walk in, you don't have a problem doing that. So I was like, I'm surprised. And I've seen people before protesting inside. We've had Supreme Court justices where there's crowds in there. How did they get in protesting if we can't enter?
Right, so, right.
I was a little confused by all that.
Interesting.
I don't think, I would say the idea of getting in is not climbing over walls and breaking windows. So
yeah,
there's some nuance to my idea that we should be able to enter as the people's house. I think there were a handful of people, that maybe more than a handful, that were violent. And, there's some discussion again on those outlets where, was the FBI involved? Was were other organizations spurring them on? I don't know. Something spurred them on, but it could have been themselves. So it's kind of a black mark. I don't look at it like it's Trump's fault. Like, if you listen to the speech,
I was going to say, I mean, I don't remember the entirety of the speech because I only heard it like at the time. I just remember clips, but yeah, I don't think, I mean, Democrats seem to think that there was a lot wrong with what he said.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the BBC recently put out the piece where they stitched, or they edited his speech, and Democrats are saying, well, you didn't need to edit it because it was just as bad on its own. And it's like, well, was it? So yeah, I don't
yeah, that goes to both. Well, it probably goes to paranoia, to when you splice it together to make it seem worse than it is. When you hear the whole speech, it's like, I understand people are upset. He was upset. Democrats are upset with what happened. Some of the people, if you did something violently that day, yeah, I think you should have been held responsible. I think that's on you. Like if your instinct when you see a Capitol police officer is to hit them with something,
Yeah.
I'm going to say that's your fault. That's not Trump's fault. I don't think, there's no amount of, cajoling I can do to get you to stop that. You crossed the road into criminality. But then you have the other people who the doors open. There's video of them, the police saying, "Yeah, come in." Go
Right.
this
Yeah.
way.
Like
And,
almost guiding them in.
right. And you have some, people, little old ladies, and they chase all these people down. And we wasted an awful lot of time to charge a bunch of people who didn't do much rather than let's concentrate on the few that did something. Like if you have someone who, did something to an officer or destroyed property, let's go after them with what the charges are. Let's not turn this into, an insurrection
Yeah.
because that's, and the book talks about the definition of insurrection and how,
Okay.
how can you can't really call it an insurrection, but it's still a black mark and that so many people felt, the election was stolen. And I mean, I think in the way the rules changed made it appear, you could see why people think, yes, Joe Biden got a lot more votes than even Barack Obama ever got. It's like, how did he do that? Nobody really thinks he's that great.
Right.
But, but that's not evidence either. It's just we believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole the January 6th thing is a little weird. I mean, and then he pardoned the people that were charged in the January 6th committee, I think. And
Yeah.
then, some of the one, the podium guy, the guy that walked around with the podium. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's like famous now. Like he wrote a book.
Yes.
He recently put out a book on like, he's just the fucking podium guy. Like that. Like I don't think he's much more than that. I think he's trying to be like a political analyst now, maybe, or like some sort of political comedic figure. But that's just ridiculous, Also, what do we got here? We got another comment from the interesting comment here. Are we not going to bring up the cop that planted the pipe bomb and then later joined the CIA? I didn't hear about that. I heard a lot of interesting things about the January 6th thing, but I never heard about that.
Yeah, there was an analysis done by I forget which outlet where they analyzed the way this woman walked and determined that I think she's a Capitol Police officer.
The person that threw a pipe bomb or planted a pipe bomb?
Yeah, outside the DNC and RNC, there was a pipe bomb left at both places the night before.
Oh, January 5th.
Yes.
Okay.
And the idea was that this is all part of a bigger, conspiracy. But that one outlet has traced that. I don't know if there's been any supporting outlets doing that. And it's all based on how, is it called the gait, the way you walk? I don't know how that you analyze that. I've never heard of that before, but I don't discount. I mean, they never did say who did it. So, I mean,
Okay.
They never solved that problem or that issue. They just said it was done. And you would think with cameras everywhere, why can't they? I mean, they actually have cameras of this, what they say is this woman walking there. And so why can't you solve it? We had, in Chicago, we had Jussie Smollett with the, the fake MAGA thing.
Oh my God, that fucking guy, man. Oh God. They just put out recently Netflix put out another documentary about it, and he's still trying to say that it was real. And it's like, come on, you fucking guy.
You gotta love a guy that sticks to his story, though.
I guess so. Even when like you've gone through that much humiliation and you have the chance to like walk away from it, it's like unbelievable, man. The cops must fucking hate that guy.
Well, and the thing is, they spent a lot of hours. Chicago has a lot of cameras everywhere, and that's all they did is they followed him on camera to camera.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking like the Boston bomber, but that's also a great. That's another good example. Like, why can't they track them down, camera to camera to camera. You're eventually going to get a good enough picture. You're going to get a license plate of a vehicle. You're going to get a location you can stake out. You're going to get a location you can go to find them. Something, right?
Right. And I think maybe that's what the question comes from. It's like, how come they didn't do this? Is it more of was it a setup, basically? I think a lot of people think that's what it was, and it's like, yeah, maybe. And I don't know. It gets to this whole, deep state thing, right? Are they trying to cover up something? And in that case, it does make you wonder that you can chase down hundreds of, old ladies that walked through the Capitol on January 6th and identify them. And all they did was walk through the place. Why do we even care who they are? And you won't go after someone that placed a pipe bomb outside a building. It's like, I think that's where the resources should have been. So, but I don't know why more hasn't been done on that. And, I know a couple of people who write, for Substack, and I forgot the outlet that broke this with the officer and how she walks and stuff, which is an interesting way of identifying someone. And even face recognition anymore. I thought you could get pretty good face recognition done anymore on camera.
I mean, I don't know. It's crazy how that wasn't. It wasn't. It's just not a bigger part of the story. It's almost like they wanted it to be a big part of the story at first, and then for people to forget more about it.
Maybe it was a backup plan in case the people on January 6th didn't rush the Capitol. I mean, because who knows what's going to happen? I mean, they're there, but it doesn't mean everybody's going to rush it.
Right. That's true. I'm just looking this up here. I got here's a recent article from just a couple weeks ago. FBI throws cold water on story suggesting Capitol Police officer was January 6th pipe bomber. Obviously, the FBI, I mean, if it was a conspiracy in some way, I'm sure the FBI would be involved. So they would be throwing water on it.
But the other side of that is, why are they still, if it's now Trump's guy that runs the FBI? I mean,
no, well, I mean, who knows, man? I mean, that it could be the old theory, the old classic theory where everyone's just crooked and everyone's on the same side and crooked at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where Trump and best friends in real life, and
right.
It's like wrestling.
All in that together.
It's like wrestling. So
yes, there's a heel.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, obviously Trump gets referenced with the WWE, WWF stuff all the time, but yeah, he's a classic heel. He's perfect heel, Trump. Like, and he plays that too. I feel like he plays that. I mean, he obviously does. People comment on that all the time, I think.
Right.
Well, I mean, like he called the girl Piggy the other day. Like, right. You know what I mean? Like I'm surprised that that's his first time doing that. I mean, doing that specifically. Obviously, he's got a big track record on how he treats women, which is problematic. But
he has. I think the problem is, like, he'll go after anybody. Often, like, I'm not sure why he was calling her Piggy, but I know there was somebody else. Maybe it was yesterday. I don't know. They weren't showing who the reporter was, so I'm not sure if it was a woman or a man. But the question you can hardly hear, but you can hear him, and he's saying, "Are you stupid?" So it's not.
He rips these reporters, man, and they, like, I love it when they do the dual screen where it's Trump just like fucking giving it to him or her, usually a her. And then the other screen is the reporter just standing there, like, just taking it and just, trying to be polite and not like, Oh, I would find it so hard not to be like, you know what, you orange fucking pig, why don't you go fuck yourself and tell the truth for once or something like that. Like I would fucking flip out.
They don't. Yeah, you don't see much flip out. I mean, you see it on his side.
Yeah,
going after them, like saying it's a dumb question, or you know, I think there was another one when was it the prince, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia was at the White House, and they asked him about the killing that happened there.
That's right. That's the one.
He's like, why would you ask him that when he's here? So he wants to correct them, but I think what some of that to a lot of supporters is, hey, that's what I would say. So he somehow connects.
I know. That's the thing, which I think a lot of people would say is a problem, but other people would say that's his strength, is that almost anything he does where people are like, oh, what the hell, he's still connecting with that other side of the coin.
Right. I think if you're a supporter, you're like, yeah, that's
another way to look at it.
I would have told him the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I would have said piggy, but I do hear some of those questions and I think that is a dumb question. Like, you went to school and this is the question you come in with, or it's just sometimes I think a lot of those, and he's always accessible. So there's really no excuse to say, well, this is the only time we get to ask you things. You can ask him things anytime you see him. He's
very accessible. I see him answering questions on the plane, getting off the plane, getting on a plane, leaving the White House, getting to the White House, in the White House, at events. So and I agree with that.
Yeah, so it's hard to say you don't. So maybe like with the Saudi prince, maybe you keep to the issues that they're talking about. That's what you're there for. But the press doesn't want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
Right. So
on the other hand, it is an opportunity to, it is an opportunity to ask other interesting questions and pertinent questions that may not relate to what the meeting is about. Right.
Right. And I think every politician's had that problem where you call a news conference and then they want to ask.
You want to talk about this.
Right.
Right. But when you have things like the Epstein files hanging out there,
right,
you just got to expect it. And I'm sure he does. That's probably why he gets so pissed off.
Right. We're doing this news conference to avoid that. We want to talk about whatever. And then you're going to ask about the Epstein files or whatever you're asking about. I mean, so.
And it gets to the point where he's like, why are you even asking about that? Like, that guy's a creep and no one even cares about him anymore. And it's almost like.
But some people do, and some of it's brought on by, podcasters and alternative journalists or independent journalists, whatever you want to call it, where they keep raising those questions and they're interested. Personally, I look at it like, there's no list. If you're looking for a list, come on. They either got rid of it, or if there ever was a list, they would have prosecuted those people, or tried to. There's not some list linking men to young girls. That just seems silly. And the fact that we keep asking for it and saying there is, and part of that was Pam Bondi. She kind of.
It's not a list in what people. It's not what people think it is. It's probably just a shit ton of documents where you can pick out names and stuff. But you got to go through that properly. You can't just say, "Oh, this name is in the file. That means he had sex with an underage girl." It could be a driver of a limousine, to a waiter at a restaurant, to a hotel clerk or something that's not even necessarily involved, right?
Yeah. And some of those things is like Epstein was in social circles with people. I think that's part of the problem.
So many social circles.
Right. And a lot of those people, they're all rich people or well-known people, like
scientists, billionaires, millionaires, royalty, politicians, everything, right? Yeah.
But it doesn't mean they were doing the same thing he was. There's it's kind of like you could have a brother or a best friend who's having some kind of an affair or something going on. You might not know about it. You may know about it, but you may not. And it
Right.
certainly doesn't mean you're doing the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Your friend might be doing that, or some of us, you've run into people who have committed crimes. It's like, yeah, I knew him. I didn't commit crimes with him. I don't, but I do know who he is. Sure, or he's a neighbor or whatever it is, and we
Yeah.
can't just have this broad brush that everybody's guilty.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're going to, especially if you're going to go with the notion that he was part of one or more intelligence agencies, which I think is likely. He's not just going to, he's got so many different circles, so many different people. He's not going to be revealing everything to everyone, the same thing to everyone. It's some people, a lot of people he had around because he genuinely wanted to be making investments for whatever reason, to know about different technologies for whatever reason, to just be around people, to show off and stuff. Because I think he was also that kind of guy as well.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, let's ask a few more questions about your book before I let you go.
Okay.
What similarities do you see historically in politics between Burr's time and Trump's time?
Yeah, I think a lot of us are under this mistaken impression that politics has only gotten dirty now. In the last decade or two, you'll even see some people here say it's because of Trump. I think politics has been dirty for a while, and it's been hardball basically. Well, heck, they were dueling back in person, but you had a lot of the same things going on. You had media presence, taking sides in the media. You have backbiting within your own party. Where I'm telling you, his closest advisors are anti-Burr. It's like, it does kind of remind you of, probably Kennedy and Johnson more than anything, where,
Okay.
you have a vice president who even the president doesn't like.
Yeah.
And certainly his people didn't like him. His brother
Yeah. His
despised
brother
Johnson.
fucking hated him.
Yeah. They despised each other, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you think, over the course of all that time, it's human nature. That's what hasn't changed. It's like kids will fight with their brothers, and and then they're best friends with their brothers. And I think in politics you have a lot of fighting. There's that old saying about, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog, because it is kind of true. You're not going to be friends. They'll dump you quickly. And I think Biden found that out, right? When they were trying to push him out, it's like all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute. Well, they don't really care about you. They care about winning.
But fuck Biden. Like that. That's like, that's not just about winning. It's also about like the future of the party, the state of the party. Like, I totally get that, though.
Right. He might have gone down. Well, I think he would have lost, but he might have done so much damage that they couldn't have recovered. And I don't know, maybe they feared he would have won. And if he won, what would he do in the 4 years? But
oh my God. Like, oh, geez. I don't even want to think about that.
But you find out, I think, that's how it works. And I think in that respect, things haven't changed. They've always been, politicians are a certain breed. Humans are too. And we do things that haven't really changed over hundreds of years.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. We talked about the media quite a bit, actually. In chapter 6 of your book, you talk about the media. You call it the media. Can you just get into that briefly?
Yeah, since now, it used to be in journalism that everybody would say, well, the owners are all Republicans of these newspapers, and the journalists might be Democrats. over the years, though, as time has gone on, it's the Democrats have really not only become there's more of them as journalists. It's now 3% in the last survey say they are Republicans. 3% of all the newsrooms in the country, which is hard to believe because we have some conservative areas in the country. So, that means you're really already getting a biased, filter coming through on your news, because you have nobody in the newsroom that's going to say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, or let me look at it a different way. But they also have a lot of ownership in some of these newspapers. Jeff Bezos, big Democrat supporter over the years, bought the Washington Post. And a lot of the people that, especially in the Obama administration, went from being in politics into important positions in television and newspapers, where they were running those organizations, both on air and off. I mean, regardless of the fact they didn't have a background in journalism or even, business. So they've infiltrated those things. And as a result, I think what we see is a slant towards the left on a lot of news. I mean, for conservatives, they do have Fox News. You have the New York Post, which leans conservative. The Wall Street Journal, although they're a different conservative, I think.
Okay.
But for the most part, it's liberal or progressive even. And that's being done. The book breaks down all the relationships. There's a lot of relatives that were, running the networks, relatives of people in the administration and the Obama administration. That becomes a problem. You're reporting on them, and it's your brother is running CBS. It's hard to get an unbiased look at things.
Yeah. All right. Well, what would you say to people? What would you say to Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters when it came to why they would be interested in the book?
I think for non-Trump supporters, they might take a look at maybe things that have happened over the last, really 10 years, and realize that everything about Trump is not negative. There are some reasons, and I think we lay out some facts that they might not realize. I think if you're a Trump supporter, I think it's something you'd want, on your bookshelf. So when your relatives who are liberal, or even those that aren't, want to bring something up, you can say, wait a minute, I have this book and this is what it says, because we do reference everything in the book is, footnoted, it's referenced. It's there's some of my opinion in there. You can't avoid that because that's me, but there is a reference to it. So you can always say, oh, you didn't just make up these facts. When it's an opinion, you can tell. So I think it's the kind of book you want for that purpose. You can have it proudly if you're a Trump supporter.
Yep. And where can people find the book? And where can they find you if you want people to find you on social media or anything like that, if you have a website or anything else you'd like to promote?
Yeah, the book is available everywhere books are sold, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. It's also available on my website, which is authordennisbrennan.com. I am on social media to an extent. I have to get better at it, but I mentioned Facebook, just my name. On X, it's at Dennis Brennan 61. And I'm on Truth Social as Dab535. And I'm available in general.
Perfect. There's the website right there.
Yes.
People, they want to check that out. Well, Dennis, I really appreciate your time. I suggest everyone check the book out. Everyone have a wonderful day. I hope you guys all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Make sure to please subscribe to the Divulgence Podcast on YouTube. You can check me out on X at Divulgence Pod as well. Thank you, everyone in the chat. everyone in the audience for listening and watching. We appreciate that. And yeah, stay safe out there.